You guys are not doing a very good job at helping me remember this. So we're just going over the disease model, which I'm describing as something that is being challenged on many levels. It doesn't mean that it's 100% wrong. It just means that it's in a vacuum. Do you guys know what a vacuum is when they say this is in a vacuum? One way to think of it is it's isolated from all influence. So when we do like biological testing, the goal is to remove all influence so we can understand this singular process, right? So if the temperature, the pressure gradients, if there's a lot of change going on in the environment, it's hard to know where the issue is when you're studying biology. And what do you think brain neurochemistry is? What do you think that is? It's biology. And how do we, and this was what makes human studies so difficult, is the fact that it's very difficult to isolate the human brain from belief sets, from reality, right? You'd have to put someone in a coma to get rid of all of the influence of fight or flight and perceptions, right? To then say it's genetics. So the guessing is genetics, the guesswork. This is how science works. We try to have an idea, we practice that idea, we have our results, we readjust, and clearly the results of the disease model are horrible. They're bad. And it doesn't mean that it's the cause, it just means we might be off. We might be off a little bit. And so I like to think of it as that's one slice of a pie that can help people, right? Explaining that this is a genetic disorder. It might help someone, but what they found is it actually made things generally worse because people felt that they were broken and it would be impossible for them to recover, which promotes further sabotage. So for example, well, screw it, I'm going to suffer with this forever, so I might as well do this. So it actually can be used as a way to enable, in the mind of someone who is seeking to survive, because that's what the brain does with its coping mechanism, it kind of gives it a, like, I'm broken, I might as well, and then I'll abstain later, right? So it actually can cause problems there. And what they also found is that people feel that they are broken, meaning it's irreparable. You'll always suffer. Forever you will suffer. You have to cope with the suffering, which is super depressing. I was told when I went in with an eating disorder, which is considered an addiction, right? An obsessive compulsive borderline personality disorder. They've changed it, they've moved it, they're rethinking it, but it's considered an addiction, an exercise addiction. That I would always have this issue. It's in my genetics. There's nothing I can do about it. It was gonna happen somewhere at some point at some time, and I will forever suffer with this. And there is one thing I do agree with, that's somewhat true, because it was my survival mechanisms working, and you can't get rid of survival. That's genetically hardwired in every single person. So, but what was triggering my survival? So from someone who doesn't look at it from that broad perspective, it looks like a disorder. It looks like a disease. It looks like something this person, clearly we can pathologize it, right? We can diagnose it. But that's somewhat defining to someone if you say you're gonna suffer forever, it's in your genes. That brought me closer to suicidal ideation than anything. It was very closely after that I was like, well, I don't wanna live this way. You just basically handed me the rope to hang myself with. Of course, that person who was there to help me didn't want that. They thought it would help me have compassion for myself, but hell no, it didn't. It made me feel that I became hopeless, right? It brought me down into those lower states of consciousness, into what's the point. So I want to go over the map of consciousness. This was developed by Dr. David R. Hawkins. There's a lot that goes into this. I'm going to stay today very much on the lower half here. So this doesn't show that break. The other picture I think we've talked about shows the break right here at courage and pride, where you can shift upwards out of survival. We're going to start here and work up. These are levels of awareness based on intensity of life security and insecurity. The way you perceive the world, think, and what motivates you changes depending on your level of consciousness. So everybody in shame is the same, because we're human. And shame functions the same way in every single one of us, right? So it's not a personal thing. So it's important when you look at these states of consciousness is that everybody in guilt is the same. Everybody in apathy, it's the same human experience. So when someone is suffering, you might not know where they're at in their suffering, but suffering is suffering. And they're probably somewhere down here in this red zone, right? And it doesn't matter what the cause is, the source of the suffering. It's still suffering, whether you're in shame because you didn't get into medical school, or you're in shame because you were raped. There is some degree of similarity based on your perceptions around how it manifests psychologically, right? So you can have compassion for this if you recognize that you're the same. You're the same, you're the same, you're the same, you're the same. What brings you to that might be different, right? But even then, it's going to be somewhat predictable, especially when it comes to human relations. So one of the other ways I like to think of this map of consciousness is this really has a lot to do with Maslow's third hierarchy of needs, belonging. Am I worthy? That's what this is all about. Competency. So it kind of moves out of belonging when you shift out of courage. So anything below courage is about belonging and feeling worthy of approval, worthy of acceptance. Does that make sense? So you're not going to necessarily feel shame because you can't find food. That would only occur if you are trying to feed your child. Then you might, you see how that adds a relationship in there. You might feel inadequate as a parent. So another way that you can think about human consciousness and how these shift our awarenesses is when you are in a more intense state of survival, especially with human around shame, guilt, apathy. It's like your energy goes down because all of your energy is honed in towards yourself. So think of it like a light bulb that dims down. The dimmer that light bulb, the less you can see outside of yourself, right? As you come up into higher states, and it can be going from shame into guilt, that's actually an improvement, right? So it's a little brighter. It's still dark. It's still lacking light, right? Going up the rings into pride, even though you're an asshole in pride. You're a jerk. You're kind of dangerous to other people. It's way brighter than someone who's in apathy, who feels it's not even worth doing anything. Why even try, right? So you do have more energy. So there are benefits to each rung, right? So shame has a benefit. It is a way that triggers you to change something, to do something. It can actually also be a way to find team. It can be a form of belonging because you can find other people in shame and commiserate. So you can be what I call co-victimization. It's often common where you find people who are, here's my sob story, and then someone's like, oh my God, I have a similar sob story. Let's have a sob story together. That's called co-victimization. So having a sob story can give you connection to other people who have a sob story too. Can you see where that might be a benefit? Right. Even though it comes with misery, depression, and those lower states are super connected to addictive behavior and impulsivity. Because no one wants to feel that. Our whole brain is wired to escape survival mechanisms, right? To try to, or survival threats to escape. So if you're living in constant shame, that's constant threat to survival. How do you feel better? How do you change your brain chemistry out of that? If your belief sets around shame, I ruined it, I failed, I'm a horrible person. If that, again, you've abandoned yourself, how can you change your brain chemistry if you yourself have abandoned yourself? It's like you can't. You'd have to change who you are to do that. So that's not easy, especially when you don't question your own beliefs. I'm sorry, I want to make sure. Oh, shit. Hold on. How do I find out if this is muted? It doesn't look muted. Now it's muted, now it's not. Sorry. It doesn't look muted, right? It's not. I don't know what to tell him. Okay, so victim of self. So in those lower states, like shame, who I am is bad. I am bad. I'm broken. I'm flawed. I failed. I'm a failure. So your identity gets attached to that valuing system based on external measures. So shame is created by being defined, being identified who you are as bad. Guilt, I'm supposed to be better than I am. These are very different because guilt isn't necessarily, shame is really about I am defined as bad. Guilt is I'm defined as good and I'm failing. So it's a little higher on the rungs, right? It's a little higher up on that ladder. I am actually awesome, but I suck at it. Versus shame, I'm horrible. I'm a terrible human being. I failed. I failed at what my parents wanted. I failed at society's wanted. It's irreparable. Can't fix it because I'm a bad person. So it really goes in and kind of triggers. And again, if you believe that, you've abandoned your true self, because chances are shame isn't attached to the true self. It's attached to a false identity, right? A conceptual self. So the key about shame is removing the conceptual self and allowing the real self to come forward and then regrading it as good enough. Apathy. Failure is irreparable. What's the point? So you can see there's no it's less attached, but it's still defining. It's more out there sucks and I can't handle it versus I suck. I'm amazing, but should be able to, poor me. That's guilt and shame are really martyrdom, and so is apathy. Martyrdom being I'm a victim of this space and myself. Again, apathy, I'm a victim of the space. Guilt, I'm a victim of me sucking. Shame, I'm a victim of me. Period. Does that make sense, you guys? This is these are, again, darkest, less dark, still dark, but less dark. That makes sense in terms of your awareness of everything around you. You can see these are very self-absorbed, self-centered, and also based in the third hierarchy of need. So we're going to go up a little bit. Grief. Grief is something that a lot of people have a hard time facing. Loss. So grief would be that, yeah, you're kind of showing signs of loss and maybe some failure in what you're trying to do. There's a lot of regret in your life choices. I should have done it differently. I regret that. I have lost. And living in grief can last decades because you're unwilling to accept. So there's a lack of acceptance in grief. So a lot of people stay in denial right in this area in grief. Because hardship happens, right? And if your fantasy of what you thought your life should be is no longer available, you might sit here in grief and resent, blame. So grief is a hard one, but a lot of people get stuck here. I want you to really think yourself through, because all of us have experienced these things. You can probably recall times where you're in grief, which means you're not willing to accept it. Even if you know you can't change it, grief is an unwillingness to face and accept and feel the process of an end point. So someone dies. If you're unwilling to feel that grief or loss or accept the loss, you may stay stuck in that grief cycle for a long time. You ever watch Hoarders? That's there's lots of different ways people cope with trying not to feel the grief or accept loss. Many times, every time I've watched Hoarders, it's like their mom died. Boom, they started collecting things, they started hoarding things, and it's a part of not really facing that permanence, right? And what the grief of loss feels like. So they're stuck in regret, remorse. Life is sad. So typically in a grief state of consciousness, the world is sad to you. You see sadness, you see loss, You're again, it's a little brighter, but all you see is what you're experiencing is your loss. Fear is a little higher, because at least in fear, you haven't done anything yet. There's still maybe a little hope and change, and there's enough competence that you're willing to work hard to prevent threat, right? But your view of life is that it is dangerous. I'm going to not only lock the door, I'm going to lock the top of the door, and then I'm going to make sure the ring camera's on, and then I got to make sure the fence ring camera's on, and then I'm going to, so there's a lot of insecurity in that. A lot of people who live in this state of fear think that it's smart, not realizing that it comes at a cost. It takes a lot of energy, and it's a sign you're not feeling very secure, right? So the benefits are you can foresee, you tend to jump, people in fear tend to jump to conclusions. Like birds do this. Other animals do this, where, you know, a bunch of birds will be sitting and they hear one little snap and they all fly off. There's no reality in the fact that maybe there wasn't anything hard or something was bad, or maybe, but they're going to spend a lot of energy jumping to the conclusion, better safe than sorry. Better safe than sorry. Again, nothing's wrong with that, but it is a state of insecurity. And it's a sign you don't think you can handle whatever that is, right? So fear, life is dangerous, loss is scary. Oh my God, I can't handle that. So again, what if you're not competent enough to get the A's you set out to get? Let's just go there. What if everything you're doing and juggling puts you in a position to where the A pluses that you wanted, the 4.0, would require you remove a class, remove work, not have relationships, can't go party, right? So if you have a real life, oh my gosh, what's going to happen if I don't get a 4.0? Well, what would happen? So someone in fear would just live in anxiety. Anxiety. So when my daughter calls and she's in that state of mind, what do you think the first thing I tell her to do is? She graduates in May. Biological engineering, biomedical engineering, minor. Can you imagine how many fucking times she's called me? What do you think I tell her? Well, so what? What if this isn't the right field for you? I go into the threat. I don't go, no way, you can handle it. Oh my God, you got it, girl. Because that is just feeding the beliefs and the fantasy, right? No, you're not fat. Well, who cares if you are? So go into the threat, question your beliefs, question your fantasy. What's your assumption that's putting you in a position of fight or flight? What would happen if you don't get all A's? What's going to happen? Can you handle that? Well, first of all, your fear is going to create a catastrophe, and then reality is going to uncatastrophize that. So in the next couple weeks, we're going to go into that technique. But fear is a big hold on a lot of people. Moving up, desire. So when I wrote this, the picture on the side here was actually a sports car with some hot girl laying on it. We have such a huge amount of desire. Our country is run on this level of consciousness. Do more, be bigger. You can achieve everything. Hey, it's again, we're turning up that light bulb, right? So when you get someone who is been depressed and in apathy, it's a big deal to get them into desire. That's a big deal. It's a huge improvement, right? But this also comes at limitation in terms of consciousness. It's not quite turned up yet, but it's turned up higher. The beauty industry, the most of everything in this country is based on desire. How much money can you make? How much buying power can you make? Consumption is based on achieving, becoming, which can be hugely beneficial. The key is not attaching your worth to it, right? That you can achieve and not it affect your sense of value, right? That would be the goal. But for in desire, you are at least confident enough to believe that you can do the work to do something good. And usually it's not for others. That's not in desire. That's way up the rungs. Desire is about because I want to prove myself, right? Because I want to show that I'm superior. I want to show I'm an authority. I want to show that I am the upper crust of our community. I want to be a higher functioning human. Can you guys understand why that would be a positive thing? Super important. It also comes with insecurity, comparison, feeling unworthy if you don't perform well. All of these come with sensitivity, again, to being stuck in survival loops. So anger is even more energized because you are confident enough that you're willing to fight. You're also confident enough to hurt other people and not give a shit. So typically in anger, you believe it's their fault that you're hurting them. Or, you're willing to fight. Again, another competency. Anger is a good thing. A lot of social injustice changes out of anger. In history, you can see people changing an entire society based on anger. It can make a big improvement in how things work. Can also be how people get lynched and get burned at the stake like a witch, right? So again, anger is very powerful in making change. You got to question where that change is and if it's empowering or if there are consequences to that. So pride is at the top of the lower levels. So pride is still a lower level fight or flight reaction consciousness, but it's pretty high up there. So pride is an inflated state. We've talked about this before. You're probably in your mind bigger than you really are. Other animals do the same thing. A dog's spine, when that hair comes up, they're trying to look bigger. Other animals bloat up. Frogs get bigger. There's ways that getting and looking bigger and being inflated can help your survival, right? The biggest issue with pride, because it's inflated, is it is super sensitive to shame. So people can go from this higher state of I'm amazing, I can do anything, to a single loss that is significant and public, because it is a social problem. It's a third hierarchy of need issue in compensation. If something negative happens, people in pride are more likely, and there's research around this, to commit suicide because they're unwilling to admit failure, and failure to them feels like death. So pride is actually very high up, and it's also quite dangerous human state of mind. I'm not willing to lose, so if I lose, everybody's going down. How many of you know someone like that? We live in a country where we have leaders like that, where they're not willing to lose, and if they lose, everybody's losing. So that's pride. So this is a very quick kind of synopsis. So starting at the top, I really liked this because the first three are victim, and it's I suck, I lose. The next ones are, well, I'm good enough, so you're gonna lose, right? So you're more toxic to others. Toxic within yourself, toxic with others. And as you go up, I'm winning, right? Esteem, competency. And then you win, we all connect, we're all community. And then it gets better and better and better, right? So you can kind of see self-centered, starting to be less self-centered, more aware of everything outside of yourself, and more freedom of the mind and life occurs down here. You're not very free up here because you're kind of stuck in that darkness and you don't have a lot of choices. You can't see any choices. So the issue for many people is they get stuck down in those states of consciousness because of their beliefs, and maybe they've abandoned themselves because of trauma, and they don't know how to get out because it's dark. It is dark. It's dark in the mind. It's not dark out here, but it's very dark in the mind. So it starts with worthlessness. And I want you to ask yourself these questions. Really ask them. Do you believe you don't change, if you don't change yourself or make yourself better, that you're inherently worthless, that if you're not improving, that you're worthless? Are you suppressing shame or feelings of being worthless? Do you have them, and are you trying to avoid them? Are you running from them, repressing them, denying them? Has something so bad happened that it feels as if life has been permanently ruined? That's a big deal. Is it permanently ruined? Is there no salvation? Is there no mercy? Is there no way to fix it? If there was something that removed those feelings, would you do that? Would you take it? I mean, if you had those feelings and lived in this space and there was something out here that could give you relief, would you do it? Anybody that says no is in denial. Of course you would. That would be like saying if a tiger is chasing you and someone said, come over here, we have some place for you to be safe. You're like, no, I wouldn't use it. You're lying to yourself. If there was a den of safety and you're being chased by a vicious animal, would you not go into that den and get safety? And how good would it feel to find that space of safety? The brain lights up, you're high. So when survival is perceived as safe, you're high. The brain, the same area of that brain lights up. You're high. Wouldn't that be addictive? Don't you think? If there was a constant threat, remember, if you're living in a state of darkness because you've abandoned yourself and you are your own enemy, you're in constant fight or flight trying to get rid of those feelings that are within you, and you drink alcohol, and that buzz gives you a sense of kindness and like, nah, I'm a good person. All of a sudden, it feels good to feel that you are worthy in that moment. Why would you not drink? Why wouldn't you want to get that buzz? You see how that works? And there's this connection to the freedom, to the buzz from this pain. So unfortunately, with addiction and disease, they don't consider pain as the problem. They think that the withdrawal is the problem, not the original pain. So there is a lack of kind of it's not in a vacuum, right?
So much of the connection of addiction and pain is related to early childhood experiences, those formative years where we are still developing our sense of who we are. So it's natural that we develop it by attaching to the form of the people that are around us. So if our parents are in pain, as they're in stress, as you shared with your story, your mother not even knowing if she was going to survive, having to give you to family members, and you even talking about her calling the doctor and saying, you know, my son just keeps on crying, like, we need to do something. And he's like, all my Jewish baby patients are crying. They're all crying right now.
Yeah, this is right after the Nazis occupied Hungary, and all the Jewish babies were crying, and you can generalize this, you know. In any situation where the parents are stressed or struggling.
I'm sorry, I got to give you a reference. This is Dr. Mate. He was Jewish and he was a child of World War II. And so this was his experience, was his family being in, you know, Germany and having children being taken from parents and having parents that are hiding. So that's what they're referring to. I wanted to give you context. Okay, I hope it starts where we...
And afraid, the energy is picked up by the kids. And not only is it picked up by the kids thinks about themselves, so somehow it's their fault. So some people grow up with a kind of guilt that they don't even realize what the source of it is. And the source of the guilt is that they didn't make their parents happy. They couldn't have made them happy, it wasn't their job, but as children, we take this on automatically. And so that a huge source of shame and guilt in this world. People say, as addicted people, of course I'm ashamed. No, you were ashamed before you were addicted.
One preceded the other.
The shame preceded the addiction. And by the way, this is true not only for addiction, but all kinds of conditions and all kinds of illnesses, as I've written in my other books. So that our self-concept develops in interaction with our parents, and children are narcissistic, and I don't mean that as a negative statement. I mean in the genuine meaning of the word. They think it's all about them. So Thich Nhat Hanh, the spiritual teacher who I'm sure you know of, he said that, the Buddhist teacher, he said that the biggest gift parents can give their kids is their own happiness. And the reason for that is, should awareness is, if my parents are happy, oh, I must be a great guy. I must be a good person. I must really be lovable. Hey, aren't I just wonderful? But if my parents are stressed and unhappy, guess whose fault it is? If they get divorced, guess whose fault it is? On the unconscious level, it's about me, it's my fault. My mother was unhappy, it was my fault. Not that it really was, but that's how the child perceives it. And so that sense of shame and failure and guilt, it precedes everything. And it's got nothing to do with who you are and what you've done or haven't done.
Have you guys heard of his work? Dr. Gabor Mate, anybody have heard of him and his work? He's an MD. He also is a psychologist, and he studies addiction. Oh my God, stop. So if you think about why someone would be more vulnerable to addiction, it could be because they're more in pain. There's something underneath that needs to be looked at. They might have more shame. It might provide a sense of connection. Same with something as simple as, I'm going to smoke pot to become friends with people, to have like my son. He created an identity around like, I'm a stoner. So what was that about? Was it about being stoned, or was it about the bond and connection to other people and feeling included when he was in 8th grade? Right? Which one was it? So the ability for him to be able to see those things, in order for him to smoke less pot, he would need to no longer be a stoner, which means he has to feel that he is no longer connected, or feels like he's, has camaraderie with these group of kids that he loved and really enjoyed, right? So it would test your identity. So what one is it about? Some people, what happens is you get more and more connected with that as a survival mechanism. Is if you let it go, all those survival mechanisms get triggered. That's what happened for me. If I did not exercise for at least an hour to burn at least 1,000 calories at the highest rate possible, it felt like I was getting chased by a bear. I would experience feelings of terror. But at the time, I wouldn't have been able to tell you why. Right? So anybody studying me would have said, oh, she's addicted. It's the exercise, it's addictive. And she's got genetics, right? Had I been able to be aware of what the issue was, I would have said, no, I'm actually chasing being thin. Because the leaner I am, the more valuable I am to my community. And if I lose that, I have nothing, because I'm a pile of crap, because I can't meet my religious ideology. It actually had everything to do with the religion. So it's not about the exercise. But I didn't know that until I actually recovered and went, here's what that is. I have a voice to now describe it. So more people like me are getting involved in research. Like what I'm doing with the class. I'm teaching you a way to approach health and wellness that I believe, because of my experience with all these things, will improve, right? So the more people that have had the issue, who've recovered from the issue, who engage in this, it's improving the science. It's improving everything. We're getting closer to actually finding solutions. So when you look at these compensations for those lower levels of consciousness, which means you're in chronic fight or flight, avoidance, know these. Preventing or trying not to enter a situation. You're trying to avoid. Escaping it. The situation is there, it's here, you've entered it, and you're trying to get out. Distraction. It's here, I don't want to look at it. That's denial. Avoidance, escape, distraction. We can keep on going. Repression, suppression. There is a plethora of coping mechanisms to not feel shame, guilt, apathy, fear, right? This is survival. So if you know there is something that will get rid of that feeling of shame, you're going to do it. Like going into a nice safe cave. It's dark in there, it's cold and small, but it's safe. And that's what these are. And that's what they've connected to addiction more so than the actual substance. That these are the things, and the substance is just allowing you that temporary relief. And then the brain can get conditioned from there, right? Like Pavlov's dogs. You connect safety to the substance, and so you avoid any danger and you go right into the substance because it's safe. It's like going into the dark cave of hell. At least that's what it felt like for me. So it's a predictable and reliable source that effectively removes painful, unpleasant, and often unbearable feelings of shame, guilt, apathy, fear, terror for me, regret, anger, and loss. You can just distract rather than face and feel. Especially when those feelings, you're not wired to face and feel. It goes against survival, right? To face and feel. That would be like saying, hey, I wonder if this tiger is going to eat me. Let's find out. You're not wired to do that. So to actually face those things is like facing your mortality or your survival.
The downtown east side of Vancouver, British Columbia is one of the world's ground zeros for addiction, and that in a few square block radius we have thousands of people injecting, inhaling, ingesting drugs of all kinds, and paying dearly for it. These people are often outside the law, certainly beset by many medical problems, due to ingestion drug use, including psychosis, including HIV, including hepatitis C, cancers, they die of overdoses. This is trench warfare, and the people that are the frontline soldiers dying from it are the people affected by addiction. So that's where I worked for 12 years. And what I learned could be summed up really very briefly by saying that addiction is not a choice that anybody makes, it's not a moral failure, it's not an ethical lapse, it's not a weakness of character, it's not a failure of will, it's just how our society depicts addiction, nor is it an inherited brain disease, which is how the medical tendency is to see it, but it actually is a response to human suffering. And all these people that I worked with had been severely traumatized as children. All the women had been sexually abused, all the men had been traumatized, some of them sexually, physically, emotionally neglected. And not only is that my perspective, it's also what the scientific and research literature shows. So addiction then is actually, rather than be a disease as such or a human choice, it actually is, it's an attempt to escape suffering temporarily. By the time I went to work there, I had already been in family practice for 20 years. I'd seen a lot, and I was quite attuned to the impact of early childhood experiences on adult psychology and adult brain physiology. But I just hadn't seen the depth and the degree until I went to work down there. So really it dramatized and confirmed for me, made it very palpable how addictions are a response to suffering, and that what people need in response to addiction is not judgment and not simply symptom control. They need to be helped to heal from their trauma, because it is all about trauma. The media, the television, cultural depiction of addicts is usually as desperate people, but without showing why they're desperate. So all that shows is the desperation for the drugs. There's no indication of what's driving that desperation. And hence you see them behaving in all kinds of dysfunctional ways, aggressive or manipulative or unpleasant. But again, there's no three-dimensional sense of the reality of these people as to what that's really all about for them. Is it possible to cure people? You're speaking from the Western model, where I am the expert, and you're the one with the disease, and I'm going to cure you, like you cure a piece of meat. You know, no. The answer to that question, framed that way, is no. It's not possible. If you're asking, is it possible for people to heal from trauma sufficiently that they don't have to keep escaping into addictions to lessen the suffering of their trauma? Yes, that's entirely possible. But the question is, under what conditions is that possible? And under the conditions that obtain in London, UK, or Vancouver, British Columbia, or in New York, or any place, under the conditions that obtain socially, legally, and from the perspective of medical practice, it's hardly a likelihood because we're approaching it from the wrong direction and with the wrong perspective. If I could constantly demonstrate that with this particular population, I could affect a 5 or 10% success rate of getting people to leave their addiction behind, I'd be considered to be a genius, because our results are so poor. When I say ours, I don't mean ours specifically in Vancouver, I don't mean that, I mean the overall treatment model for addiction is so poor in succeeding with the most affected segments of the population. So, I mean, addictions are like everything else on a spectrum. So a lot of people do heal from addictions, but the most inveterate, most entrenched addicts, they have the hardest time, and they're also the ones whom society gives the hardest time. So that it makes it even harder to help them. Never mind they don't get the help they need, they actually get actively punished. And so what you actually got is traumatized children, and children are traumatized, that affects how they feel about themselves, which is deeply ashamed. Because the child always believes that it's about himself. So if I'm being hurt like this, I gotta be a terrible person. Or if I was sexually abused, why didn't I fight back? I must be a very weak person. So there's a deep sense of shame. Then there's tremendous emotional pain that accrues from abuse and neglect. Tremendous emotional pain that is hardly possible for people to bear. Now they have to soothe their pain with substances or the compulsive behaviors. Then the trauma itself, given that the human brain develops an interaction with the environment, shapes the brain circuitry in such a way that the person will be more likely to find relief from the drugs. So the very physiology of the brain is affected by the trauma. So then you take these traumatized people and you make their habit illegal. It's not illegal to drink yourself to death. It's not illegal to make yourself sick with emphysema or lung cancer by means of cigarettes, but it is illegal to use other substances. So now you take these abused, traumatized people, you place them outside the law, you put them in jails, and you hound them all their lives, treating them like criminals and bad people and failures and rejects and less than human. And then we wonder how come they don't get better. So it's a self-perpetuating cycle of taking traumatized people and then re-traumatizing them, and then hoping at the same time, why don't they listen? Why don't they get better already? Why don't they give it up? Well, they don't give it up because the more hurt they are, the more they need to escape. In other words, the addiction wasn't your problem. The problem was that you had a lot of emotional pain you didn't know what to do with. So the addiction was really an attempt to solve a problem. So when you say, why do people use substances or why do they engage in addiction in general, it's because they have a problem they don't know what to do with. And if you really understand their addiction, you have to ask, well, what gave you so much emotional pain? And how come you didn't have the internal resources? This is not a judgment, it's simply an inquiry. How come you lacked at some point the internal resources to deal with that pain in a more creative, forward-looking way that would help you resolve the pain rather than to perpetuate it? So really what it was is that the addiction came along to help you solve a problem you had no other solutions for at the time. And that's the case for all addictions. So why do people use? Why do people engage in addictions? Because they have deep emotional problems they don't have the means to resolve on their own. That's why they use. The average medical student, until very recently, has never even heard the word trauma in their education. It doesn't show up. We don't talk about it. We don't talk about its impact on the brain, on the personality, and on the emotional life of people, on its impact on people's physical health. It's not a word that we mention. They're traumaphobic. As a fellow doctor said to me, the medical profession is traumaphobic. Psychiatrists these days are trained mostly in this biological model of psychiatry where everything comes down to a biological brain disease. Here, let's give you a pill. The last thing most psychiatrists know how to talk about is actually emotional pain or its origins in human experience. You'd think they know how to do that, but they don't. They're not trained in it. It's not part of the predominant medical ideology. And as a physician, I can tell you, we like to think of medical as a science, and it has certainly great scientific achievements to its credit and great scientific insights to buttress its successes. But it's as much as ideology as a science. And ideology has certain hidden assumptions that are hidden from the people that believe in ideology. And so that if something is excluded by your ideology, you just won't see it. And so that you can be talking to somebody about your addiction, and a simple question, what did they do for you? And how come you're in so much emotional pain? It doesn't occur to anybody, trained in a classical manner. No, this is true not just for physicians, it's true for a lot of psychologists as well, who are more interested in solving their problems and getting you to overcome the behavior than in asking, well, okay, where does behavior come from? And what are you still carrying inside that's making you behave that way? And how can we help you resolve what's inside you? Not just how do we help you change your behavior, but how do we help you change? Now that's what healing is. And that happens inside a person. So it's never a question of anybody curing anybody else, but we can guide people to healing if we ask the right questions.
Oh shit. Oh my god. I don't know how that happened. Hold on. Stop. Stop. Oh, sorry you guys. Just give me a moment.
The downtown east side
Stop.
of Vancouver, British Columbia,
Anybody have any comments on that? Anybody? I thought he's pretty profound in everything he studies and I love how he describes it. There's more from him. You can go on YouTube and find so much. He's written books, but this holistic approach can make a huge difference. Again, when I went to go get help, the way I was approached was from the surface, right? Oh, you're obsessed with food. Let's talk about food. Food must be your problem. Let's work on your food behavior. But underneath all that was a lot of depth. But that's not what they're trained to see. And that's changing as this new science is becoming more engaged, but it's very difficult to do that if all you see is the surface. And you have and if someone is privileged enough to never have this experience, how can they understand it if they don't have a sense of it? They have to memorize it. It's conceptual to them. So it helps to have someone like Dr. Mate who can really put words to the intellect, right? The knowledge with his actual experience with behavioral issues. Because he was addicted behaviorally. So he came at it, recovered from obsessively and addictively purchasing CDs. He had this CD collection he was obsessed with, right? So all of your states of higher consciousness, this is another theory. What these behaviors do is give you that temporary feeling of safety, which ultimately to the brain is like saying, hey, you're safe, your survival is complete. So it allows you to kind of experience higher states of consciousness, what that feels like, to be loving, to be generous, to feel connected with people, to feel that everything is good. It's giving you an illusion that it's coming from the drug, when in reality it's coming from the repression of your survival suffering. So it's removing the suffering is a theory. That is Dr. David R. Hawkins, the one that created the map of consciousness. That was his theory, and he studied addiction for 50 years. The more intense the lower states of consciousness, the more intense your shame, the bigger the trigger, right? Because that manifests psychologically as a threat. So the bigger your shame, the worse you feel. It's like jumping into a fire pit, right? If you were to not escape it, the more likely you are to find a substance that is equally oppositely effective. So when you talk to someone, for example, who is abusing, let's just say, pot, their issues are very different than someone who is going towards meth, right? How intense the pain is and what their brain is attracted to. It's different. So again, when you get that temporary illusion of security, the light turns on. And that's the theory, is that actually you're experiencing, when you're high, a higher state of consciousness. And that was Dr. Hawkins' theory. I gotta move quick. I might have to finish this conversation on Monday, but let me run through this because we do have an assignment that I'll just have you do after class again. So initially, that your brain likes to memorize where security is, just like your brain likes to memorize where threats are, right? Like if you were walking in the wilderness and there's this area where there was a bear that attacked you, you would always know what that area is. You remember the smells, the sight, the sounds, what it looked like. If you have past trauma, some of you know everything about what happened, when it happened. Your whole sensory system opens up and it creates a locked memory, right? The brain does the same thing when you find a safety from that threat. So it kind of goes back to, remember I talked about using bear spray? There's a huge threat and bear spray saved the whole world, right? It saved you. So you can create, the brain will have an attachment to bear spray, right? It says bear spray is your survival. Bear spray is your sanctity. It is your source of life. And your brain gets high on like getting excited about buying bear spray. That's just a simplified way of doing it, but people get high on their coping mechanism before they've even started. So any of you who've had an experience of addiction, whether it's behavioral or substance, would agree. Like, oh yeah, the moment I decide I'm gonna do it, I'm fucking high as a kite. I haven't even done it yet. Because your brain is saying, yes, safety from whatever shit you're sitting in. It wants out, and it starts to stimulate pleasure just thinking about it. That's why you negotiate, rationalize, justifications, all the things that people who have these connections and bonds and codependencies with substance and behaviors, you're justifying it. That's because you're already getting high on it. You just want to complete the high by taking the substance, which is really feeling higher in your consciousness. I'm going to work through this. So a lot of people in denial because they don't want to give it up because it's how you're surviving. If someone said to me, if I knew I had this addiction or my eating disorder, why would I want to give that up if it's supplying me with so much survival? It's giving me a sense of stability, calm, control. It's doing all those things. Why would I admit I have the problem? So denial is a big part of it because if you look at what this is, it's survival mode. So why would you say, I'm willfully giving up my bear spray when I live in amongst bears? It's crazy to even think that you wouldn't lie, hide, or cheat about it. Put yourself in those shoes. Of course you're going to lie, deny, repress, hide. Of course. And of course you're not going to be able to abstain, especially when it's connected to abandoning yourself, which is where shame lies. If you've abandoned your true self, you're not going to be able to abstain. It's period. Especially when there's this secondary conditioning that says your survival depends on this. So what happens if you don't use the substance or the behavior is you will start to feel panic, terror, eyesight shovels in. It feels like you're going to get murdered. It feels like the worst murder possible to stop what you're doing. So it gets worse and worse and worse. So the trigger becomes less like, oh, I'm afraid, I'm nervous, I'm anxious. It gets into a place where it feels like the Grim Reaper is breathing down your neck. Wouldn't you want to escape? Wouldn't you want to, right? So it gets to a place where it feels like you're chronically in the worst survival panic all the time. I remember one time there was like 15 times a day that Grim Reaper showed up. So this is where it looks like an obsessive compulsive disorder, right? Because I had to do this. And if anybody else here had that same feeling, you would have done the same thing if that same thing relieved it. So of course there's an ability to abstain. You're trying to survive. That's your brain working perfectly how it's supposed to in survival. It's not meant to sit there and stare at the Grim Reaper and have a conversation. Hey, what you doing? Why are you here? You're not meant to do that. You're meant to abstain from death. That's what that is. Compulsions, and this is what it looks like. Right there. Anybody who has been diagnosed with an obsessive compulsive disorder, you know what I'm talking about, because that's what it feels like. Preoccupation, because you become more dependent. It becomes more important to you. like hoarding your ammunition, hoarding guns, people that have like hordes and hordes of guns and they're waiting for the apocalypse any day now. That's somewhat of a preoccupation. They're obsessed, or you could say addicted, with their survival tools, right? There's nothing wrong with that when you look at the context. Out of context is freaking wackadoodle, right? It looks like mental illness. We could say it is to some degree because it's extreme. So fear and terror can precede the compulsions. Lack of control, but the reality is anybody who's had these issues, you're in control the whole time. It's just which one's worse, hurting my family or surviving in this moment, because at some point they'll forgive me, but this survival won't. I'll die. I will implode into nothingness, right? So it looks like a lack of control. In reality, the person in it is in total control. In fact, it's so much control that they're losing. They have nothing else to think about. That's all they think about, because they're that traumatized underneath it, and they've created such an intense dependence to avoid those negative feelings. The other thing with this, and then we'll close and we can start up on Monday. The other thing with this is the more attached to that defense mechanism or protection you get, the more you learn it, the more you understand it. You become an expert at your addiction. Like, you're really good at it. You know everything about it. You lose touch with the capacity to handle the underlying pain because you're avoiding it. You're not looking at it. You're denying it. You're immediately, you feel it, you go, boom, into your addiction. So you start to not really understand the pain originally at all. And you become extreme PhD expert at how you escape, avoid, and deny. Very good at that. And so to stop, if again, you can see that too in combination would create a more catastrophic situation. Okay, so let me just roll past all that. We'll come back to all this. Whoop, nope, we're not going to watch that right now. I just want to get to our assignment. Okay, so this was the assignment for today's participation. You guys can turn it in later today. It says it's due at noon. I don't, just turn it in when you get it in today. What are the ways that you cope, run, hide, distract, escape, and avoid? Do not say you don't do that unless you want your covert narcissism to be overt to me. Don't just say, I don't do that. Yes, you do. What are situations you're impelled to do? What are the situations that put you in that position? I can't handle this. I have to go, I have to drink. I have to make my bed. I have to wash my hands. I don't care what it is. It can be something simple. And what levels of consciousness on that map do you tend to sit at? Like, where's your natural space of sitting? Are you in fear? Are you in pride? Where do you sit at in terms of the survival side of it? When you're in survival, not the upper side. Don't tell me you're transcended, even if you are. In your survival mind, which one do you sit at? So those are the 3 questions that are due today. Okay, we'll see you guys on Monday.